The Crystal Charter, Daughter of the Red Seal. Read and written by Rebecca Sewell. Chapter 2. It had been a decade since Maebe had last prayed, yet the hypocritical thought floated and twisted at the top of her mind like a dead whale, a grotesque idea that she just kept poking at. Gods, help me if I have to sit through one more meal with the Lady Certainly True of Seacrest. Her father's second wife was only 2 years older than Maebe, dark-haired, brown-eyed, and cursed with a frozen smile that Maebe once suggested lowered her intellect. She was dressed in her usual style, a high-collared lace dress, today she'd chosen a peach colour, overly modest and old-fashioned. Maebe gazed around the dining room, searching for a distraction from the vacant smile that sat opposite her. The room was chill in the evenings because of the large glass doors at one end. The cold light above was coming from the flickering magic hanging from the ceiling in the form of a wide, shallow chandelier of polished crystals. She had only been back in the manor for 3 days, and already Maebe recalled that the large glass doors and blue lights were not the only reason her home felt so cold, even in the late radiance of spring. Sitting at the head of the table, her father with his steel-grey eyes glazed over in hollow thought, the same grey as Maebe's own eyes, he avoided conversations between his daughter and young wife. Certainly was a lady. Marrying into the Sumine family made her wealthier, but she lost her status. Maebe wondered if it was worth losing her title to be little more than the wife of an over-glorified merchant. But the Taroos were of little consequence, so she conceded that she would have done the same. Certainly's family owned a small estate across the Moonay Gulf. The area consigned to the Taroos covered a slither of land between the flat, fertile lands of the north and the barely inhabited mountainous west wing. Its largest town was little more than an oversized fishing village called Seacrest. Seacrest's most redeeming factor was its proximity to Clest, the centre point for all legal magics practised in green. The blasted mountains cupped the city, as one cups the face of a lover before kissing them, in possessive protection. Anyone wishing to visit had no choice but to arrive by sea. It would take less than half a day from Seacrest to reach Clest, the only thing of interest Maebe saw in the western wing. I only went to Clest a few times, Certainly said. The journey by sea makes me ever so sick. Certainly, your family owns a boat. You can't really expect me to believe that you've never been to the sea market, or to see the artificer guilds on display in the guild gallery. Certainly only shook her head slowly. Do you really have no desire to do anything, to see anything? An exasperated question. Maebe asked only because the little patience she had been storing away had already been spent. Of course I do things. Certainly's eyes betrayed a bit of offence at the remark Maebe had made, but her empty smile remained in place. Maebe questioned, asking a higher power for a reprieve once again. The thought crawled around her brain, whilst her eyes rolled so far back she could have sworn she'd seen the words dragging themselves across her skull. Every year I see the flowers in the garden bloom beautifully because of the hard work me and my sister put into caring for them. I see my mother smile when we spend time together cooking. I see my nephews run around excitedly when they come to stay at Seacrest House. I get to play with them and— Well, you live here now. We're your family, Maebe snapped, the words bitter as black coffee. She blew upwards, lifting a strand of auburn hair that had freed itself from her braid. It fluttered back onto her nose with irritating leisure. Did you pester Sarah to help you let cook again? Maebe let her fork clang against her plate. I didn't pester anybody. Certainly shook her head softly, eyes thoughtful, as if only realizing the head cook wouldn't tell her otherwise. You did though, didn't you? Maebe slumped back on her chair. I put off my food enough by seeing you at the table. I don't need to know you've touched— Maebe! Maebe jumped, then offered a grim smile to her father, who had decided to interrupt, his hand on the table, clenched in anger. Enough. No more of that behaviour for tonight. Finally deciding to join the conversation, father. Do I have to resort to insulting people at the dinner table to get you to speak up now? She hadn't spoken the words about certainly to hurt her, just to see how far she could push it before her father decided to interrupt. "If you wish to converse, then speak like the woman you were raised to be," he remarked. "How are preparations for the next southern tour, father?" Maebe asked, a sudden change in subject and an amiable smile on her face. Her father's expression gentled, pleased that she had chosen to discuss the family contract. The Sumine 3 is currently in a sorry state. She's being careened and had some work done on minor refits before we set sail in 2 weeks," he mused. The Sumine 3 was the third rebuild of the family's personal ship, bestowed upon the Sumine family by some distant king generations ago. Which came first, the original family ship or the family name? Nobody alive knew. "We'll be out before the start of summer this year, and be back by midwinter. We're expecting an easy sail, with only pre-scheduled pickups for the rest of the year," he continued. As the holder of the Red Seal contract, her father was the Nave-Arch of the Red Seal fleet, the only trading vessels with permission to trade for magical items outside of green. In return for the contracts, a member of the Sumine family made a blood offering and collected the king's burden from Camulus. The independent deals her father would arrange in other cities en route would be collected by the 9 other Red Seal ships throughout the year. They'd be inspected at the capital before being dispersed around the country, usually to Clest. At most, he would be gone for 3 months. There were only 2 pure-blood Sumines left living, and so far, Maebe had never made the journey by herself. "It was such a shame that you missed last year's trip. I actually wanted to surprise you, but your cabin was one of the refits, and the trip just isn't the same without my little girl finding exciting items for me to purchase." He gave his daughter a fond smile, crooked from the years of sorrow, but still eerily affectionate. Maebe was proud of her knowledge of the laws of her own country, and she was often immersed in books about the magic-ruled countries of the south. They only traded in the main, but witches from other countries travelled to that western coastline to make deal with the Red Seal merchants. She had spent years studying the laborious regulations and endless amendments so that she could benefit fully from their journeys south. Eventually, she would replace her father. Maebe spread a slow smile across her face as she replied, "Now, father, you know I've spent the last week at the palace with Mouse. Well, you'll be glad to know we patched up after the little fallout. I even helped him plan his trip to Clest," she crooned. The smile on her face turned vulpine. "I said I'd accompany him. It just happens to fall before you leave, so I shan't even be able to say farewell to you. I'll be back long before you, though." "You're doing this again." Her father's voice turned leaden, as his face creased with vehement disappointment. She allowed herself a small laugh before he sighed through his nose. "If you get lonely, you could take Certainly to show her the burning sights of the main," she offered, an innocent smile pasted over her satisfaction. "I could make the journey if you really wanted it of me, but I don't have Sumine blood, so I don't think I'm really needed. It would only make me horribly queasy, and I'd be useless," Certainly chimed in with a note of panic. Maebe almost felt sorry for the girl. Certainly hadn't realised she was being used as bait to provoke an argument, and as a distraction from Maebe's announcement. "You mean more than usual," Maebe jeered. "Besides, we know, you already mentioned how seasick you get." How can anyone be so oblivious, she thought. Certainly's perpetual smile faltered, and she frowned into her barely touched plate of roast mutton and vegetables. "I've had enough of your acid tongue for tonight, May, and thankfully I managed enough food before you ruined yet another meal." Maebe's father tossed his napkin onto the table and touched a crystal to summon a servant into the room. "Thank you for helping in the kitchen, certainly, but I wish you would find a hobby more befitting of this family. I shall see you both at dinner tomorrow night. I'll have to leave early," he growled. With that, he used his hands to wheel back from the table on his custom-made wheelchair, a gift from Prince Jaciel. It wasn't gifted out of kindness, but so he could continue working with relative ease. He stopped after a short distance to allow the summoned servant to push him towards the renovated chamber on the ground floor. Minutes of painful silence extended between the two women. Maebe helped herself to a dessert of strawberries, sprinkling a little extra sugar on top, and Certainly continued to push several chunks of carrot around her plate in shifting patterns. After she sighed into her meal wistfully for a third time, Maebe found her presence insufferable. "I'm finished with my meal as well," she announced, pushing away from the dark wood of the table and taking a long look around the room. Once, she had loved the light blue paint of the wood-panelled wall, the long cream drapes, and the pale fireplace. She had found the small dining room to be open and refreshing during the summer, then warm and cosy during winter. It was the room they reserved for intimate meals. The large dining room was for formal occasions, but had been shut off with many other rooms for years. Nothing had changed in the manor since her mother had died, but everything had lost its comfort. She glanced towards Certainly as the servant, returned from helping her father, opened the door. The hollow smile was finally gone, only to be replaced by a lost stare. That increasingly familiar expression annoyed Maebe, but it was the reason she had avoided teasing her quite so much in the last few weeks. "Good night, sir," she murmured. Certainly's head jerked upright with bright shining eyes. "Good night, mate. Perhaps tomorrow—" Maebe walked out of the door before Certainly could finish. "Oh, I should not have said that. My pity's not going to help her. Now she's just going to bother me in the morning."